All right, hello everybody. We'll see if I can get this stream to work with me here. Seems like my bandwidth's not happy right now. Let's see. Can you give me a chat? Tell me what it looks like out there. Well, this is not good news. It says my 8 megabit upload is below the recommended stream bitrate. Okay, I don't know what to do about that. I'm wondering if I can lower the resolution. Okay. Let's see. Is that working now? Okay, had to lower the bit rate. Apparently my upload is not fast enough. So, welcome to my very first stream. My name is Cameron Nix. I'm going to be working on the Qidi X-Max. It's fairly stripped down right now. It's been apart for a while. Figured when I, blew part of the motherboard and some of the mods, I would do some others on the to-do list. And so now I figured I could share the process of getting it back together and maybe some fine-tuning depending on how long it takes. So, welcome. All right. So, here's the X-Max stripped down to its frame. It is, let me see, let me adjust this just a little bit. That better? All right. So, it's a very just square frame. And what I figured while I was down here, first thing I did was I removed the heat shrink that was on the bed cable and put some actual nice mesh on there. And then I did a lot of cosmetic mods in this one. The primary goal of this main mod was to put in Vesconite. These are polymer bushings, polymer bearings. These ones were custom machined to fit in place of the flange bearing, the 12 millimeter, because I couldn't find anyone else that had anything compatible. Because I had some of these that were leaving scratch marks down the rods, and I was tired of greasing them and oiling them, and so I wanted to get this printer so that there's no oil, there's no mess, and there's essentially no maintenance on those. And on a benefit on the XY, it'll be a lot quieter. But actually, in my hand testing of these bearings, right, they're pretty loud. When they're vertical, right, they're vertical like this, all of the oil drips down. These seals aren't good enough to keep the oil in there. And so I was constantly having to re-oil. I made the mistake of using some thicker Teflon loaded grease. Don't do that. That gummed up all inside the tracks, and the solid particles, you can never wash them out. So I figured I would just get the Vesconite while I was at it. I've got the other set, but I will not be doing those tonight because the XY is actually in a pretty good calibration right now. But even just wiggle testing this, these actually have more play than the Vesconite. And some of the reason behind doing these mods is Z artifacts, right? I don't know if you can really see that. Let me get some more light going here. Right, this one has a bit of banding. If you can see right there, see those stripes there? Those are actually temperature banding, right? When it's hotter, it's a bit shinier. And that was fixed by putting on a silicone sock and putting in some thermal compound. But in a lot of the other prints I was doing, I had a lot of Z artifacts of just, inconsistencies, right? And I traced one of them down to non-concentric extruder gears. So as it was going, every time this extruder gear would turn around, it would push more out. But these ones were a lot of the Z. And so I've actually rebuilt this Z 3 times, so a little familiar with it. But I think this time will be the best time. All right, so some of the other cosmetics I did too was I took the kind of the rod holders and I painted them. I had some orange, so I was like, why not? And then I decided to do this other kind of proof of concept. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But I actually embedded 2 pins, some header pins down there, and then the bottom of the Vesconite bearing, I have a copper tape. I'll replace it with an actual gold pad, so that this can act as the Z limit. Because I found the Z limit switches, you have to also calibrate the trigger height. So this is just a proof of concept. If it doesn't work, I'll just pull them out. It's just a couple holes drilled in the side. Yeah, I did a few in that one. And then in terms of actual bed mods, so I took the main support plate and I epoxy coated that in a black epoxy paint. or so they call it. And then I flipped it over, right? So this lip actually faces down. I was tired of trying to clean out from the tracks, and then I'm squishing down the bed more. I'm going to try to recover a little more of the print height. So I lowered down the bushings. I also redesigned the printable leveling nuts and put shorter screws on there so that they're not poking through so far. These are an M4. I'll be posting the designs for this. It's actually a modification on an old OpenSCAD file, so you can actually control how big it is and how tall it is and how many, you know, dimples on the side there are. But I have this so it's kind of low profile underneath it, and there's lock nuts under there, so it shouldn't move around by itself. The next planned mods for this is to put an insulative material here. This pad actually on the desk is a 8mm thick silicone heat press pad. It might be too tall, so I also have some neoprene cork and some regular cork that I'll try out. Let's see. So I think that's oh, the ones I took the aluminum. I don't know what you'd call these, but these actually stabilize the rods in the top. And then I really like the anodized aluminum, but it's kind of stands out. So I did a blackout and put some sign vinyl, some Oracal sign vinyl on this. It's a nice matte black. And then also on the rods that are at the top, just to reduce some of the unnecessary chrome. Not a chrome fan. All right, no comments so far. So if anybody has any questions on any of this and you're not part of the live stream, you can always reach out to me on Facebook, or I'm in the Discord as well. Username is Functon, because it's a metric Functon. Inside joke. Okay, so I'm gonna start by putting these lower receivers back in. Oh, sorry. Almost forgot. What the other mod I also did was I've got some palm anti-backlash nuts. The hardware is going to be a little interesting, and I may or may not be able to actually use the other side of this just because of some spacing. So that'll be kind of one of the unknowns. But Qidi support, for some reason, when I was troubleshooting the layer artifacts, and I traced it down to the extruder gear and told them about it, hoping that they would fix it. Instead, they just sent me a brand new set of Z lead screws. So while they were completely bare, never had any grease on them, I actually did a dry lube PTFE dry coating on these, just to kind of reduce a little more of the friction, even with the palm nut. Don't know if it actually helps or not, but this printer is just kind of turning into a big experiment at this point. It's my first printer, and I like to tinker and see how good I can make something or modify it. So, and I'm hoping that somebody might find any of this information useful. If they do, fantastic. If they don't, then sorry, I'll try harder. All right, so I believe that Qidi actually puts these motors in first and then drops them in. So I guess I can do that instead of loading it from underneath. Let me find the right screws. I'm gonna move some of this stuff out of the way. Okay. Yeah, once we get into it, I'll actually show you kind of some of the places that you can make sure that the Z is calibrated and in place, right? Because what I noticed when I first got the machine, it wasn't completely square up, and sometimes on the Z it would actually bind. And you know how I figured that out is on the screws, I undid the nuts on both sides just so that the whole bed was kind of floating just on the bearings, and I lifted it up and down, right? And then I felt where it was binding, if it was binding, and then I was able to actually, you know, using the bed itself to calibrate it in square from the top of the frame down to the lowers. because this printer has also had the top pulled off of it a couple times. I rebuilt the XY twice. I rebuilt the bearings, and I put new aluminum GT2 pulleys and belts on there because the original ones were very wobbly, and the whole entire gantry would just make this whoa, 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 whoa sound when you'd push it. And now this is nice through the whole motion. So that fixed a bit of the layer inconsistencies as well because it wasn't like wobbling, right? So I'm gonna take this. You can see okay. I didn't know what kind of angles would work for this. So again, I say it's very first. So it's been apart so long that I have to remember which screws are which. I'm sure somebody might give me some crap for that, but I have tons of spare parts. Let's see. Get some wrenches. Okay, so these lowers, the molding on them is actually not even completely flat, so these screws actually hold it in square, right? So if these outer ones aren't tightened, the rods can actually kind of bow inward. Once everything's all in place, it's all fairly constrained, but there is some wiggle room in a few directions that you need to be aware of. All right. Sorry, I don't have any like elevator music for you guys to listen to. The one of you. Hello. Or is that YouTube saying that I am watching my own stream? I do not know. Okay, that side's in. Go ahead and drop it. I've also done a bit of work cable routing this whole entire thing, and I don't know if you can see that. See this front right here? I've actually adjusted where the motherboard sits. It usually sits out like 1.5 inches or so, and I recessed that back in. Had to move one of the power modules in there, and now I'm designing a faceplate for it and the LCD. I think the LCD will go here, or in the center, or up top. Haven't decided just yet. All right, second motor. So, crazy times we're living in these days. Hope you all have been staying safe and sane. Maybe you've been able to work on your printers. I think this camera actually looks better. Let me think. All right. in. So one of the reasons to use this contact Z limit switch idea is to get this completely clear, nice flat area, no switches poking out, and it might increase the Z height by a few millimeter, hopefully. Ooh. Not that I ever really print tall things. Okay, so 4 screws for the motors. All right, you can see that it's kind of wobbly. 4 in the corners, 2 right there, and in mine, they're actually such a bad mold that the screw has like worn through the wall. I don't know what that's about, but it should be fine. So these are black oxide, looks like what, 5 millimeter M3s. So I'm going to get these all started. I'm not going to tighten any of them, not yet. That's one of the ways that you can square up between the 2 sides, is you can loosen the bottom and make sure, well, you know, if the bed is actually binding against the bearings, when you do that, it'll slightly shift itself and line up. And then I do that for the top as well. Let's see, is this better? Not really. Yeah, this is where the screw hole doesn't actually line up that great. So if these streams are something that more people want to see, then I can plan some more. I am planning a few additional mods. Let's see on my list. The LCD front bezel placement. Let's see. I've got an all metal hot end design that uses mostly stock parts without printing carriages and stuff. I was in the middle of testing that when I pinched a cable and blew the thermocouple amplifier on the motherboard. And that's what led to me first taking all this apart. And then it just snowballed from there. Let's see, I am planning a acrylic case design. And I think that's most of it right now, actually. I did quite a few in this round. Okay, so these are in, but not tight. Well, kind of tight. Just to get it to lay mostly flat. All right, so I'm gonna take off the nuts here. Now I need to decide if the Z nuts are going to be underneath with the bed, you know, resting on it this way, or if it's upside down. Let's see, I've never really used anti-backlash, so I would assume that I want the bed pressure always on this side, because if it's upside down like this, then the whole entire bed, spring force wise, is pushing down against the bottom nut. So when it's vertical, the top nut section springs open to fill the slack. But do I have room for that? I do not know. right, so I'm going to set the bed in. Let's see. I need to angle it in here. I think this is why I didn't put the motors in first before, and I just put them in from underneath. Well then. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and feed these on. We'll see if we can make it work. And if there isn't rooms for, or space for the anti-backlash portion of the nut, then I'll just run with these. I just don't like the bed falling when the motors disengage. My bash ones were getting a little sloppy anyways. Okay, let's see if I can get this in here. Angle it under the carriage. Oh, it's heavy. Pinch my. Okay. Well then. Yeah, took a little bit of that paint. Excuse me. Oh, another mod to mention is I drilled out the bearings that they put in this top retainer because it was over constraining the Z nut or lead screw. I know in some newer versions they cost reduced and put in couplers, but these are integrated lead screws. You know, I have an integrated Y as well, and 2 sets of those. But I went ahead and just pulled out those bearings just to make sure it wasn't over constrained. Okay, here, do you want a better view? That better? All right. Now, one thing I've been debating, I know the Vesconite runs well dry, but you can make it just a little bit quieter with grease, which kind of defeats the whole greaseless thing, so I don't know. Decisions. Okay, I'm just using a microfiber. These have already been stripped with 99% IPA. But I'm just getting the last fingerprints out. And I also took the Vesconites and cleaned them under a scope because there was a little bit of machining stuff. All right. Well, seems like my bandwidth is degrading. Crap. All right, these need a seat down in the bottom. find them. Get in there. Okay, that one doesn't want to see yet. Now, I guess these bottom pieces are bowed. Okay. Okay, well, I might actually have to screw these down a little more. The whole thing should be able to. Oop. It's all a little precarious right now. Yeah. Okay. So it's bound up right now, but all of them are seated. I'm going to go ahead and put in the top braces. And then I can lift it up to those top braces and screw down the bottom. I guess hindsight, I could have tightened up the bottoms first and then realigned later. Okay. So these have the long tab toward the back. This side is the left. I realize you can't actually see. Hold on. All right. You line up the rods and place it over top. Let's shuffle. And there goes a carriage. All right, I'm just going to put these in. You can see the next one. All right, so these ones up here use the, let's see, M3, they have washers on them. I think they're like a 6mm. Two in the front, two in the back. Make sure they're lined up. So this is one of the pieces that has a little wiggle room because the holes are actually horizontal slots. So the entire upper portion can actually shift side to side. So even if they're square with each other, they might not be squared up with the frame. And so up here, they actually have a tapped 10mm linear rod from the top here. And that is supposed to keep it all squared up there, but there is a little tolerance in all of these holes. And so that's where you can find some misalignment, and they are not great at factory calibration, I'll tell you that much. All right, these again, I'm going to not fully tighten, just seat them down. I'm going to wait until the end to actually tighten all this stuff up when we can get it all calibrated. All right, that side's in. Come to this side. Okay, I got some new wire mods down there, so I gotta kind of fit this next to it. I didn't like the humongous cable chain for the X wires. It just seemed like a complete total waste because they weren't actually using it to take any of the strain, and they're just dangling the whole thing off the side with a zip tie. So I took it off, and I'm just going to, well, I've got a plan mod for this where it'll come from the backside here instead of running along the bottom, and then it uses a well, a fancy little trick, and we'll cover that later. But it will just look like a nice mesh sleeve, essentially. So if you ever notice on your printer, if you look at these top braces, they actually bow upward a little bit. They're actually putting quite a bit of force on the rods themselves. I just kind of was a little disconcerted about that. Or concerned. What was the reason for all this? The main reason that I took it down this far was to put in Vesconite. Vesconite bearings are a polymer type bushing. They started getting into 3D printer bushings a year or two ago. Essentially like a dryland, but different. And I wanted to get rid of all the oil and the grease, and I had essentially destroyed my linear bearings by packing them with an what is it, NCHL2 grade grease. If you're actually going to use grease instead of oil, because the oil tends to drip out the bottom, right? If you're actually going to use a grease, I was looking for a 000, but the 00 is it's close enough. That's the viscosity, so it's like a really thin oil or a thin grease, and this is just a lithium soap grease. There's no particles of Teflon in there. So if I had this back when I rebuilt the bearings, then I probably wouldn't be doing this mod, but it's mainly for the Vesconite, because I don't like linear ball bearings. They have a lot of slack in them, and I was trying to get rid of some Z artifacts, some banding, stuff like that. And then while I was down there, I wanted to do some cosmetic mods, so I painted the base tray black, and I flipped it upside down because I didn't like the look of the lip coming up, and it was also hard clean. And then I painted the bottom sections orange. But one common thing for all of you that don't have printers stripped down this far is once I get to actually calibrating the bed or the Z gantry, right? Making sure it's all squared up. Some of that stuff, like I had to do from factory, it was pretty far out, and it would bind when I would roll it up to the top. Oh yeah. So right now these bearings are pretty tight because they haven't been worked in at all. right? And now, besides the top plate, the lower plates, all the screws there that you can loosen and get squared up if there's any binding, you can also just loosen the screws on the actual bearings, right? The screws holding on the flange bearings. If you undo the Z nuts, you're able to lift up and down the bed by itself. And that's how I found the initial binding points. And so from that, once it was free and I could just lift it up and down by hand, I loosened all the bearing screws and then raised it up, tightened them, then dropped it down, checked for any binding, and I kind of redid that. So I lined it up to the top, right? Because the top placement of the rods can't really move, right? So I'm actually going to do that now. I don't know how tight these are. I replaced all the screws here too with the low profile black ones, just kind of cosmetic. But with them a little bit loose, the whole entire bearing is free to shift around. Because there is quite a bit of slop and tolerance in these holes. So that's something you can do without actually pulling apart the whole machine, is just undo the screws of these Z nuts and then lift up and down the bed by hand and just check for binding. Check for any points that are hard or sticking. I actually, you know, from the gummed up bearings, I started seeing scratches on my rods. So yeah, that's a lot better. All right, so I'm gonna raise it up to about right here, and then I'm gonna go ahead and just start tightening. Now, also something to keep in mind is these right now are kind of free to float. So, take it back. I'm not going to tighten those up just yet. I'm going to put on the top supporting rod pieces. Normally these are chrome. I wrapped them in vinyl just to make them black, make them look better, in my opinion. So these go up here. I've got some additional lighting mods up here, so I'm gonna make sure I don't run into them. It's the first time they're into. So I haven't run the machine with all of these mods just yet. It's been pretty apart for a while. So it'll be nice to get it back together and get it printing. I've been holding off for a little bit, just everything going on, and I wanted to test streaming it, see if anybody could get any value out of it. So these rods have a bit less room to wiggle around. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and tighten that one down, tighten this one down. I'm just securing them to these top braces, and then I'll go back and get it from the top. Okay, so it's good and tight. Okay, so this is all still wiggleable. Checking the actual squared up to the frame all the way will probably be a tall vertical print and do like an L. For now, it's about squaring everything up with itself and make sure there's no loose or tight spots. Get some more screws here. Guess I'm missing one. Every time Qidi sends me extra parts, they send me a handful of hardware too. It's interesting to work with them. But I recently got to work with another company on a much more expensive printer, and they were not great to deal with. So we ended up sending that thing back. I could buy like 4 of these for that price. Oh, never mind. I already put it in that screw. Look at that. Okay, that's extra. Yeah, the X Plus, as far as I know, is pretty much the exact same design except for the bed size. From all the pictures I've seen, it's the same. But also keep in mind that depending on how old your machine is, they've gone through a lot of different cost down measures. I know that this is one of the older machines. I think it's almost 2 years old now. And the revision before this one actually had another solid aluminum plate instead of the bent chrome steel plate. And I wish I could find one of those just because it looks nice and solid. But yeah, I think pretty much any of this will also translate to the X Plus. All right, I'm leaving these ones a little loose too. Okay. See, all these are able to move around. So, okay. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to lift up the main bed, kind of eyeball the straightness in the frame. I know I got the frame pretty straight last time I had the whole entire top off. And so, I'll just kind of eyeball it, and then I'll cinch down the top screws here, and that will lock the top plates mostly in place, and then the front screws and the back screws. All right, so that scraping is the lead screw. Since I took out that bearing at the top, it just kind of is free to float around. All right. Yep, looks pretty close. Pardon the arm. Wasn't quite sure what kind of camera angles would work well for this. I don't know if maybe an overhead would be better. All right. Close it down. I'm gonna go ahead and cinch up the front here. We're dropping it. Okay, all the top is cinched down. Bottom feels a little tighter than the top here. It kind of loosens up right about here. That'll probably go out once these are tightened down the bottom. Just because the whole thing is a little bowed. These are what, fiberglass reinforced nylon, my guess. Yeah, I think I got a little more distance here because the bearings will actually bottom out to the top right when the nozzle is there. Which means that I probably can't use the top of the anti-backlash nuts. That's okay. Okay, down at the bottom, feel how much wiggle room there is. It actually feels pretty solid. Eyeball the base again. Oop, almost lost my mic. Okay, that looks okay. I'm gonna go ahead and tighten down the bottom too. Let's see. Put something under here. Hold it up. Just as a FYI, any of the black oxide screws, I've noticed that they can strip out a little more than the other ones, especially the frame screws. So just FYI, when you're working with those, make sure you have a bit that fits really well. So I almost got one stuck using the included wrenches. This one's gotten pretty rounded off. Good. Use my good bit here. Oh, that one doesn't have a screw. That might do it. Maybe that's why the bowing up more. Ah. Okay. A lot of screws. Okay, that looks good for now. Let's see. Ooh, line's at the bottom. See that? So, I wonder if that is just these molds. I've noticed they're not great. So maybe this is where the tighter tolerance of the polymer bearing works against me. Just because the ball bearings have so much extra wiggle room. Yeah. Just a little bit of space. I might be able to get that down just a little bit more without stripping out. Well, real nice through this area. Up at the top where it's going to spend most of its life is pretty good. You know, I even thought about putting the limit switches at the top so that it just homes at the top instead of going all the way down and then all the way back up. So without putting something on the rods themselves to kind of see where it's getting tighter, I don't really know if I can do anything about this. The Vesconite bearings themselves will most likely kind of wear in to wherever is tighter, right? Let's see if I can make sure that these are allowed to shift around a little bit more. So if anyone is interested in the Vesconite, I just use their contact form and ask them if they could, like, well, they have the standard 10 millimeter, 12 millimeter. They have those standard. You can just go to their web shop and add those to cart. But in order to get the flange version, I had to contact them. A couple emails back and forth. They whipped up a drawing of this bearing, a compatible one. I had them adjust how deep the screw pockets were, just because I wasn't sure if the actual plastic it's made out of, if like a single millimeter thickness that it was holding down was going to be strong enough. So I actually had them do this 1.5 millimeter pocket out of, or half this distance. I think it might have been 3 millimeters. But that made the screw heads, you know, poke way up, and that's why I put on the low profile ones. So if you contact them and ask them if you want the modified ones or the standard, I think the wall thickness on there would be fine after getting these. Just don't cinch it way down. I think it would be fine as long as you don't put any lateral forces on it. Or you can get these, and I found some low profile screws on McMaster in black, you know, just to make them look good. Okay, loosening these didn't really fix the bind point, so I'm gonna go ahead and tighten these up. It feels good up toward the top. Down at the bottom is a little more drag. It'll just kind of wear into that. If these ever do like start wearing, you know, as that hole opens up, you can actually take these and push them away from each other to put, you know, more, you know, contact pressure against the two sides, because you just don't want the whole entire bed shifting around the rods, right? Doesn't matter if a single one can shift on the rod, but after looking at their data sheet, I think these bearings will probably outlast the printer, or at least my ownership of it. Who knows? At this point, if I try to sell this as an X-Max, people might look at me funny. I still have all the plastics, I just don't like them. They add way too much room onto it, just empty airspace. And I haven't been printing anything that needed an enclosure recently, so I just left it off. But once I get a acrylic panels designed, I'll post those so that other people can make them. Let's see. How long have we been going? Excuse me. All right, let's feel this. Whoa. Well, that bound up. Okay. This might be a little more difficult than I thought. So, when I tightened up the bearings, now they're bound up at the top. So, clearly, the act of actually tightening these screws shifted them. So I'm wondering if it would be better if I tightened them at the top. This is how these things go, right? You have an assumption of how they're supposed to work or how it's going to come together, and then it's completely different once you get through it. But that's the fun part. You get to learn through it. But there are a lot of them. Okay. Okay. So I'm just going to hold it up here while tightening them down. All right, now I'll tighten two each and check it. This material might squish a little under the screw, so I'm not gonna tighten it down too tight, just kind of snug. Okay, that still seems pretty bound up. So, question is, why is it good through the center here and not through the top? That leads me to think that the rods are actually bowed from being pushed down on the upper plates. I'm wondering if this is going to be too much for these motors, or if I need to work them loose a little bit. interesting. I guess I can maybe loosen up these top, see if a little wiggle will help unbind it. I'll start with one. Come on, unbind. So yeah, it's binding at the bottom and at the top, which leads me to think that these are bowing either in or out, just from being compressed from the top and bottom. I don't know if there's anything I can do about that though. Well, you know, I could always run these bearings just slightly loose. I actually did that with the nuts before. When I thought the rods were pushing it back and forth, I kept the nuts just a tiny bit loose. Not enough to actually wiggle around when it's printing, but enough to let itself align itself. Is tough. See if I can expand it just a little bit. All right, I guess I'll just need to plug it in and see if that binds up the motors, because they don't have a ton of torque, or if I need to rectify all this or wear them down a little bit, break them in, or put some oil in there. Huh. Okay, well, go ahead and lift up the nuts a bit. These just barely fit in there. Yep, not gonna be able to use the springs. Well, it doesn't seem like the bed is just gonna drop anyway, so it'll be fine. Let's see, the stock screws were too short. So, hold on one sec. Sorry about that. Wasn't quite sure what I was gonna run into here. It's 8mm. Okay. Eight millimeter just barely protrudes. I think I might use a little longer. Next up is a 12. This part is actually going to bottom out before anything else. It might be an issue at this bed height. I might need to trim those. We'll see. 12s are too tall. Eights are fine. These are one of the unknown parts in this process. I haven't actually test fitted. Whew, that just barely fits. Seemed to fit. Okay. Okay, one side in. Now the stock brass nuts are actually tapped, and so these screws thread straight into it. And these palm nuts are acetyl, which is a Delrin, are not threaded, and the holes are too big to thread the what is it, M3, M4? One of these, M3. Yeah, I tried an M4, but then the holes in the plate itself needed to be expanded, and it just didn't quite fit. Oh, so I guess I did a little bit of test fitting just to check what might work. Sorry, this is kind of slow and boring for you. Ooh, these just barely fit. The nuts are actually like against the wall of the nut. I guess I could thread them in from the top down. That'd probably be easier. Oh well. Too far along now. There we go. The threads to start in these nuts is proven to be a little tricky. Without cross-threading. Okay. Nuts are in. So, should I fire it up and see if they can even move? I guess that's the next step, right? I've got to find the cable. LCD cable and the LCD. Then turn it on its side. Connect that stuff on the bottom. Take this carriage off. Don't squish your connectors too much. You might not like it. The cable's in. Motor cable. Motor cable. Alright, so if you can see here. So I've taken the motherboard and I've shifted it back. There's an extra set of holes. I just moved them over. It kind of clustered these parts in right here, and then I took the power recovery switch module, took it off the standoffs because they're kind of covered up now. Printed a little holder for it, and then just stuck it to the base. Right, so it's just kind of in a little pocket there. I'm going to replace this fan. I've already replaced the power supply fan with the Noctua, one of the very first mods I did. Here are my homemade little end stops that accept the contacts inside the kind of well here. Hook those in. There's a little LED to tell me that it's on. I just didn't know where to pipe that. Oh. Let's see. Hook it up. Or I could just kind of leave them down here for now. I don't know. These are definitely new. So if these don't work, I'll put the switches back on. All the day. Let's see. Ribbon cable. Make sure these are on the right direction for the LCD. Free. So, I don't really have a place just yet, but okay, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over, plug it in. Squished in there. Might also need the power switch. Oh, another mod I did is I took the power supply, the power interrupt, I don't know what you call it, backup board, and I took off the screw terminals and put on plug on for the switch. All right, because I found myself having to undo that a handful of times. Okay. Who wants to bet if it turns on or not? Hey. All right. I'm running a custom UI firmware just from tinkering. All right, so let's see if we can get the Z moving, or if it's bound up too tight. Well, that moved. Okay. Shall we test the home? Let's see, it doesn't have just a Z home. I don't have the Octoprint set up. I can go ahead and plug in the other switches and just trigger them by hand. The Y is plugged in, okay. Home, it does a X and a Y. It's not happy about that. No. Let's try again. Okay, my Y cable wasn't seated all the way, that's why. X works, okay. Home. Okay, it's gonna try homing the X now. And if it starts binding, I'll just kill it because that means my mod doesn't work. Hey, it worked. Look at that. Let's see. Is there a little LED lit here? All right. So there's the little LED for that side. Little LED for that side. Let's try homing again. Works. What's that sound though? It's kind of a chunk sound when it starts moving. That might mean that it has kind of overcome that binding force, the friction, which as it moves while printing, that might cause some more artifacts. So that has me a little worried. Don't know if you can hear that. A lot less in the middle where it's not binding. Yeah. Ooh. So, first thing to bottom out at the top is the Z nuts. So, and that is at system about info. It says my Z is at minus 8.46. So I'm 8.5 millimeters taller than usual. Okay. So if I took those Z nuts and cut them down a little bit, I could recover, it looks like 2-3 more. Or I could drill out the lead screw hole bigger. I don't know. All right, so to kind of sum up everything, we put the motors and the screws into the lower section, these lower retainers, screwed those down, and then put in the bed, put in the rods, put in the top retainers, the top rods, and then trying to square everything up. Saw a bunch of binding with these Vesconites, so I'm gonna have to work through those and probably get back on their actual performance, because you know they seem nice on paper, but they might not actually work that great in practice. So that's something to be seen. I know the other actual bearings I got off Amazon or something were not very good, and all 4 of them look like they came from a different factory. So if I had to go back to linears, I don't know. Or if anything, these just need to break in where those spots, whether it be by hand or by running. But it seems like the lead screws, the motors can overcome that friction. They don't skip. Does kind of have a stickingness when the screws actually go down, but don't know if that's actually going to be an issue in printing. And then also the proof of concept of triggering the lower Z limit just using a contact, and really it's just a piece of copper tape contacting over 2 header pins. Don't know if that's going to be reliable, so I don't know. That's fun. So thanks for joining me. My name's Cameron Nix. If you made it this far, thanks.